The rain fell in sheets that afternoon, turning the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center's gravel parking lot into a maze of puddles. I pulled my thin sweater tighter around my shoulders as I hurried between kennels for the final check of the day. The smell of wet fur, antiseptic, and pine bedding filled my nostrils, scents that had become as familiar to me as my own heartbeat over the 5 years I'd worked here. Water dripped from the edges of the metal roofing in steady rhythms, creating a melancholy soundtrack that matched my mood. "Last one, Ellie. Then you can go," Dr. Winters called from the main office, not bothering to look up from his paperwork. His tone carried the same dismissive edge it always did when addressing me, the center's least qualified staff member, the one with only a veterinary assistant certificate instead of proper credentials. The one everyone tolerated but never truly respected. "Yes, sir," I replied, my voice barely audible over the drumming of rain. I'd always been this way, quiet, cautious, existing in the margins. Even as a child, I'd preferred the company of injured birds and stray cats to the cruelty of classmates who found my shyness strange and my blonde hair too pale, almost ghostly. My grandmother used to tell me that my gentle hands were a gift, that I could soothe pain with just a touch. Before she passed, she'd pressed her silver pendant into my palm, a small wolf with amber eyes that I now wore every day beneath my scrubs. "Remember, Eleanor," she'd whispered, "strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet choice to be kind when the world expects you to turn away." I touched the pendant through my shirt as I approached the last kennel. The schedule showed it was empty, due for deep cleaning tomorrow. But a sound stopped me in my tracks. A whimper so faint I might have imagined it, nearly lost beneath the pounding rain. I peered into the shadows of the concrete enclosure. There, huddled in the far corner on a scrap of blanket someone had forgotten to remove, lay a tiny gray bundle. My heart constricted as I carefully unlatched the door. A wolf pup, no more than a few weeks old, trembled violently, its matted fur soaked through. One of its hind legs was twisted at an unnatural angle, and dried blood crusted around a gash on its side. "Oh God," I breathed, immediately dropping to my knees beside the creature. Wolf pups were strictly off-limits at our center. Dr. Winters had made his position clear after the controversy last year. No predator species that might endanger the center's funding or reputation. Especially not wolves, with all the political tension surrounding their reintroduction to local forests. I should call him. I should follow protocol. But as the pup's eyes fluttered open, amber eyes like the ones on my pendant, I knew I couldn't. Those eyes held such pain and fear. But something else too. A desperate will to live that resonated deep within my own quiet soul. My hands moved of their own accord, gently lifting the tiny body. The pup was severely hypothermic and dehydrated, probably separated from its mother for days. I glanced toward the office where Dr. Winters was focused on his computer, then back at the suffering creature. In that moment, everything crystallized into a simple choice. Follow the rules, or follow my heart. I tucked the pup inside my sweater, against the warmth of my skin, and slipped through the back door to the treatment room. Working quickly, I gathered supplies, warming pads, fluids, antibiotics, splint materials. My fingers, usually clumsy under observation, moved with unexpected precision as I established an IV line and slowly raised the pup's temperature. "Stay with me, little one," I whispered, cleaning the wound with gentle strokes. "I've got you now." The leg would need surgery eventually, but for tonight, a temporary splint would have to do. I administered pain medication and antibiotics, prepared a small nest of blankets in one of the recovery crates, and settled the pup inside. For the first time since I'd found it, its breathing steadied, and a tiny pink tongue darted out to lick my fingertips. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" Dr. Winters stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the exit, face flushed with anger. Behind him, Melanie from reception peered around his shoulder, her expression a mixture of shock and vindictive satisfaction. She'd never liked me. "It's a wolf pup," I said quietly, standing my ground despite the trembling in my knees. "It would have died if I'd left it. Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice rose with each word. "We have strict policies, Eleanor. This center operates on county funding and private donations. We can't afford a scandal over wolves when half the town wants them gone. It's just a baby, I argued, my voice stronger than I'd expected. It needed help. It needed to be reported to Wildlife Services. They handle predator species, not us. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. This is exactly why I hesitated to hire you. You're too emotional, too impulsive. The unfairness of his words stung. In 5 years, I'd never once broken protocol until today. I'd endured every dismissive comment, every overlooked contribution, every time someone else received credit for my suggestions. You'll leave the animal here. I'll make the appropriate calls in the morning. His tone left no room for discussion as he added, "And Eleanor, clear out your locker tonight. Your services won't be needed moving forward." The words hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath. My job, the only place I'd ever felt useful, even if never fully valued, gone in an instant. "You can't be serious," I whispered. "Over one pup? This isn't just about the wolf, it's about judgment and protocol. We need staff we can trust." He gestured toward the door. "You have 30 minutes to collect your things." Melanie's satisfied smirk disappeared as she backed away, no doubt eager to spread the news of my dismissal. Dr. Winters followed, pausing only to add, "I'll be in my office. Bring your key card before you leave." Alone again with the sleeping pup, I felt hot tears streak down my cheeks. The enormity of what I'd done, what I'd sacrificed, crashed over me. My apartment rent was already 2 weeks overdue. Job prospects in our small mountain town were scarce, especially for someone with my limited qualifications. Yet as I looked at the tiny creature breathing steadily now because of my intervention, I couldn't bring myself to regret my choice. I gently stroked its soft ear, and suddenly the pup turned and nuzzled into my touch. Seeking comfort even in sleep, something fierce and protective bloomed in my chest. I couldn't leave it here to be handed over to Wildlife Services, where it would likely be euthanized as unsuitable for rehabilitation. The decision formed in my mind with startling clarity. I gathered the pup, still nestled in its blankets, and slipped it into my backpack, leaving enough space for air circulation. I collected more antibiotics, fluids, and medical supplies, tucking them beside the crate. The theft weighed on my conscience, but I pushed aside the guilt. This wasn't just about breaking rules anymore. It was about saving a life. 30 minutes later, I stood in the pouring rain beside my ancient Honda, key card surrendered, locker emptied of 5 years' worth of memories. The pup stirred in my backpack as I carefully placed it on the passenger seat. Through the windshield, I caught Dr. Winters watching from the window, his expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. I drove home in silence, the windshield wipers keeping frantic time with my racing thoughts. My small cabin sat at the edge of town, bordered by national forest on 2 sides, a place I'd chosen for its solitude and proximity to nature. Tonight, it felt like a refuge. Inside, I transformed my tiny kitchen into a makeshift veterinary unit. The pup whimpered as I rebandaged its wounds and coaxed it to accept water mixed with electrolytes from a dropper. "You need a name," I said, gently rubbing its belly as it lay exhausted from the ordeal. "How about Ember? For those eyes of yours." Ember responded with a tiny yawn that nearly broke my heart with its innocence. I prepared a nest beside my bed using an old laundry basket lined with blankets and settled the pup inside. Tomorrow would bring countless problems. Finding a new job, explaining medical supplies missing from the center, figuring out how to care for a wild animal. But tonight, I'd made the right choice. Perhaps the first truly brave choice of my life. I fell asleep to the sound of Ember's steady breathing and the distant call of thunder rolling away over the mountains. My dreams were filled with amber eyes and forests I'd never seen, places where I ran without fear or hesitation, alongside shapes that moved like shadows through the trees. Morning arrived with startling brightness. The storm had passed, leaving behind that particular mountain clarity that makes every color seem too vivid, too real. I blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar weight on my chest. During the night, Ember had somehow climbed out of the basket and curled against me, his tiny body rising and falling with each breath. Reality rushed back, my lost job, the stolen pup, the uncertain future stretching before me. But those concerns seemed distant as Ember stirred, yawning widely to reveal needle-sharp teeth before licking my chin with surprising affection. "Good morning to you too," I murmured, carefully sitting up and cradling him in my arms. The morning check revealed encouraging signs. His temperature was normal, the wound looked cleaner, and he eagerly accepted the formula I'd prepared according to wildlife rehabilitation guidelines. As I sipped my coffee at the kitchen table, Ember dozing in my lap, a sharp knock at the door sent my heart racing. No one ever visited my cabin, especially not at 7 in the morning. Had Dr. Winters reported the theft already? Were the authorities here to charge me with possession of a protected species? I gently placed Ember in his basket and approached the door, pulse hammering in my throat. Through the peephole, I saw not police officers, but a single man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothing. His face was partially obscured by the brim of a black cap, but something about his stance, a barely contained energy, a predatory stillness, sent a shiver of apprehension down my spine. With trembling fingers, I opened the door just enough to peer out. "Can I help you?" The man looked up, and I found myself pinned by eyes so intensely green they seemed to glow against his tan skin. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he removed his cap, and the movement revealed a jagged scar that ran from his left temple to jaw. Despite the scar, or perhaps because of it, his face possessed a striking, almost severe handsomeness that made my breath catch. "Eleanor Bennett?" His voice was deep, with a roughness that suggested it wasn't often used. I nodded mutely, fingers tightening on the door edge. "You have something that belongs to me." He stated it as a simple fact, not a question or accusation. His gaze moved past me, scanning what he could see of my cabin with unnerving intensity. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "And how do you know my name?" A smile flickered across his face. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "The wolf pup. I've come for him." My blood turned to ice. "There's no wolf here," I lied, even as Ember let out a tiny whine from inside the cabin, as if deliberately contradicting me. The stranger's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes darkened. "I can hear him, and I can smell the antibiotics and formula you're using." He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Eleanor. I just want what's mine." "Yours?" I repeated, confusion momentarily overriding my fear. "I found him abandoned at the wildlife center." "He wasn't abandoned. He was taken." There was an edge to his words now, a barely restrained anger. "From a den 2 miles north of here 3 days ago. His mother was shot by poachers." The information hit me like a physical blow. Those monsters had killed a mother wolf, and then what? Taken her pup as a trophy? My mind raced to piece together how Ember had ended up at the center. "I don't understand," I said. "How do you know all this? Who are you?" He paused, seeming to weigh his response. "My name is Rowan Vega. I work with the Northern Valley Wolf Conservation Project." He reached slowly into his jacket and produced an ID card with his photo and the project's logo. "I track and protect the local packs." I studied his credentials, still wary but slightly reassured. The Northern Valley Project was legitimate. A controversial but respected organization that monitored the wolf populations recently reintroduced to our forests. "If you work with the Conservation Project, why not go through official channels?" I asked. "Contact the center directly?" A bitter smile crossed his face. "Your Dr. Winters and I have a complicated history. He doesn't believe in our work. If I'd gone to him officially, that pup would have been euthanized before I could intervene." His eyes met mine directly, "just like you knew would happen, which is why you took him." The accuracy of his assessment left me speechless. He'd somehow pieced together exactly what had happened, and my motivations. "How did you find me?" I managed to ask. "Small town. Word travels." He shrugged. "Someone at the center mentioned a blonde woman who got fired for helping a wolf pup. There aren't many cabins out this way." Behind me, Ember whimpered again, louder this time. Rowan's attention immediately shifted to the sound, his entire demeanor changing. "Please," he said, and for the first time, I heard genuine emotion in his voice. "Let me see him. If you care about his welfare, you'll want my help. He needs specialized care." Something in his plea resonated with the part of me that had risked everything for the pup in the first place. I hesitated, then opened the door wider. "He's injured," I said, as Rowan stepped inside. His back leg was broken and he had a deep gash on his side. "I've stabilized him, but..." My words died as I watched Rowan kneel beside Ember's basket. The transformation in the man was astonishing. The intensity that had made him seem dangerous moments before now focused into a gentle concentration as he carefully examined the pup. His large, scarred hands moved with surprising delicacy over Ember's tiny body. "You did this, Splint?" he asked, inspecting my handiwork. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm a veterinary assistant. Was, anyway. Good work. Clean bandaging, too." He looked up at me with something like respect. Most people wouldn't know how to treat hypovolemic shock in a wolf pup. He would have died without intervention. A flush of pride warmed my cheeks at the unexpected praise. "He still needs proper surgery for that leg." "Yes." Rowan gently lifted Ember, who, to my surprise, immediately nuzzled into the man's palm. "I know someone who can help, a veterinarian who works with our project." I watched the interaction with mixed emotions. The pup clearly recognized Rowan's scent, responding to him with none of the fear he'd shown toward others. Yet the thought of handing Ember over to this stranger, however qualified, created a hollow ache in my chest. "You've named him," Rowan observed, noting the way Ember responded when I called him. "Just temporarily," I said quickly. "I know he's not a pet." Rowan studied me for a long moment. "No, he's not. But he's not entirely wild either. Not anymore. Not after being handled by humans at this critical age." He stroked Ember's head with his thumb. "The pack won't accept him now, even if his injuries heal." The implications of his words settled over me. "What will happen to him then? Normally, he'd be placed at a conservation center." Rowan's expression grew troubled. "But spaces are limited, and a pup with this level of injury..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Even at conservation centers, resources were finite, and priority went to animals with the best chance of recovery or breeding potential. So he'll be euthanized anyway. The unfairness of it burned in my throat. After everything, he'll still die, because humans decided he's inconvenient. Rowan's green eyes flashed with unexpected empathy. "Not necessarily." He hesitated, then continued. "There's another option. I have a property deeper in the forest. I rehabilitate wolves that can't return to the wild, mostly older animals or those too habituated to humans." He looked down at Ember. "I could take him there." Hope flickered inside me. He'd live. It's not an easy life. He'd never run truly wild. But yes, he'd live. Rowan's focus returned to me, his gaze assessing. "The first few months are critical, though. He needs round-the-clock care, specialized feeding. I usually do it alone, but with my tracking responsibilities..." I understood what he wasn't explicitly saying. "You need help. I need someone with medical training who isn't afraid of wolves." The hint of a smile touched his lips. Someone who'd risk their career to save a pup. My thoughts spun with the implication. Was he offering me a job? Before I could formulate a response, my phone rang with a local number I didn't recognize. I excused myself and answered. The caller was Mrs. Abernathy from the town's only veterinary clinic. "Eleanor, I heard what happened at the wildlife center," she said without preamble. "Thomas Winters is an old fool. Listen, one of our assistants just gave notice. The pay isn't much, but if you're interested..." The offer was a lifeline, steady work in my field, a chance to stay in the town I'd called home for years. I thanked her profusely and promised to call back within the hour. When I returned to Rowan, he was feeding Ember with the dropper, his expression softer than I'd seen it yet. He looked up, and something in my face must have revealed the nature of the call. "Good news?" he asked. A job offer. At the vet clinic in town. I twisted my hands together. It's what I need right now. He nodded once, his expression unreadable. Of course. A practical choice. He began gathering Ember's supplies. I should get him to the surgeon today if that leg is going to heal properly. Reality crashed back. He was taking Ember away. The pup would go to some remote cabin with this man I'd just met, and I'd likely never see him again. The thought created a physical ache, surprising in its intensity. Wait, I said impulsively. Your conservation work, is it a paid position? Rowan looked up, surprise evident in his face. Yes, though barely. Grant funding, mostly seasonal. And you said you needed help, with Ember and the other wolves. Understanding dawned in his eyes. It's nothing like working at a proper clinic. The cabin is isolated. The work is demanding, unconventional. He studied my face. Most people wouldn't consider it. I'm not most people, I replied, the truth of the statement surprising me as much as him. I've never really fit in town anyway. A moment of silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. Finally, Rowan spoke. The job requires living on site. There's a small guest cabin, basic but comfortable enough. My heart raced with the magnitude of what I was considering. Leaving my home, turning down secure employment, moving to the wilderness with a virtual stranger to care for injured wolves. It was reckless, impulsive, completely unlike me. Or was it? Perhaps this was exactly who I'd always been beneath the quiet exterior. Someone willing to follow her convictions, even into uncertain territory. I'd need to see this place first, I said. Meet the other wolves. Understand what I'd be getting into. Rowan's expression shifted, something like respect glimmering in his eyes. Fair enough. I can take you there today, after we get the pup to the surgeon. He held my gaze. But Eleanor, if you're serious, you should know this isn't a temporary position. Wolves form attachments. Once Ember bonds with you as his caretaker, separating would be traumatic for him. The weight of the commitment settled over me. Not just a job, but a profound responsibility to a creature that would depend on me completely. I understand, I said quietly. Outside, clouds had begun to gather again, casting moving shadows across the cabin floor. I packed a small bag with essentials, called Mrs. Abernathy to politely decline her offer, and within an hour was sitting beside Rowan in his rugged Land Rover. Ember nestled in a carrier between us. We drove in silence for a while, following Forest Service roads deeper into the mountains than I'd ever ventured. The landscape grew progressively wilder, the human imprint receding with each mile. I stared out the window at ancient pines and glimpses of rocky ridges, wondering what lay ahead. Why wolves? I finally asked, genuinely curious about the scarred, intense man beside me. Rowan kept his eyes on the difficult road. They're misunderstood, feared without reason, hunted without mercy. His knuckles whitened slightly on the steering wheel. People see only teeth and threat. They don't see the intelligence, the family bonds, the essential role in the ecosystem. You speak like someone with a personal connection, I observed. A muscle tightened in his jaw. My father was Arapaho. In our stories, wolves are teachers, guides. He navigated around a fallen branch. When I was 12, I found a wolf caught in a poacher's trap. I tried to free it myself and got this for my trouble. He gestured to the scar on his face. But the wolf could have killed me and didn't. Even in its pain and fear, it showed more restraint than the men who set the trap. I absorbed his words, understanding a little better the passion that drove him. Did you save it? The trapped wolf? No. His voice was flat. By the time I returned with help, the poachers had found it first. The brutal honesty of his answer silenced me. We continued driving as the road narrowed further, eventually turning onto a nearly invisible track that wound through dense forest. After another 20 minutes, the trees parted to reveal a clearing with a sturdy log cabin. Behind it stood a smaller structure, presumably the guest quarters he'd mentioned. The property backed against a sheer cliff face, with mountains rising in every direction. We're here, Rowan said, parking near the main cabin. The veterinarian will meet us in about an hour. As I stepped out of the vehicle, the profound quiet struck me first. No traffic noise, no human voices, just wind through pines and distant bird calls. The air felt different here, cleaner and sharper in my lungs. Then I heard it, a chorus of howls rising from somewhere behind the cabin, harmonizing in a sound that raised the hair on my arms and resonated in some ancient part of my brain. The howls weren't threatening exactly, but they carried a wild power that no recording could capture. "They know we're here," Rowan said, coming to stand beside me. "They can smell Ember. And you." I looked toward the sound. "How many wolves do you have?" 5 adults currently, all with stories similar to what Ember might have faced. He gestured toward a large, fenced enclosure I hadn't noticed initially, partially hidden by the contour of the land. "They have 10 acres to roam, with heated shelters for winter. It's not freedom, but it's the best alternative." As if responding to his voice, a large gray wolf appeared at the edge of the enclosure, watching us with unmistakable intelligence. Others joined it one by one, until 5 pairs of eyes studied our arrival. "They're beautiful," I whispered, mesmerized by their presence. Beside me, Ember stirred in his carrier, responding to the howls with a tiny, experimental yip of his own. The sound was so earnest, so full of instinctive recognition, that I felt tears prick my eyes. Rowan noticed. "Second thoughts?" he asked quietly. I watched the wild beauty of the adult wolves, then looked down at the injured pup we'd rescued. Finally, I turned to the strange, scarred man who had brought me to this remote place that somehow felt more right than anywhere I'd been before. "No," I said with unexpected certainty. No second thoughts at all. The veterinarian arrived as promised. A woman named Dr. Harlow, with silver-streaked hair and no-nonsense movements that spoke of decades of experience. She examined Ember thoroughly on Rowan's kitchen table, which had been transformed into an impromptu operating space. "Good initial care," she commented, glancing at me approvingly. "Kept him alive when most wouldn't have managed it." Her surgical work was swift and precise, as she repaired Ember's leg with a proper pin. I assisted, falling easily into the familiar rhythm of passing instruments and monitoring vital signs. Throughout the procedure, Rowan stood nearby, his presence steady and watchful. "He'll need 6 weeks minimum before putting weight on that leg," Dr. Harlow explained as she finished bandaging. "Daily physical therapy after the first 2 weeks. Antibiotics for 10 days. She handed me detailed instructions. "You're staying to help, I take it?" "Yes," I answered, surprising myself with how natural it felt, at least through his recovery. Dr. Harlow's experienced eyes moved between Rowan and me. "Good. He needs both of you now." She gathered her equipment. "I'll check back in a week. Call if anything changes." After she left, we settled Ember in a warm nest near the wood stove in Rowan's cabin. The pup, drowsy from medication, curled into sleep with a contented sigh. I found myself reluctant to leave his side, even temporarily. "You should see where you'll be staying," Rowan said, "and meet the others properly." The guest cabin was small but thoughtfully arranged. A main room with a kitchenette and sitting area, a bedroom with a pine-framed bed, and a simple bathroom with surprisingly modern fixtures. Large windows faced the forest, filling the space with dappled light. "It's perfect," I said, genuinely pleased by the cozy simplicity. Rowan nodded, seeming relieved by my approval. "The main cabin has better medical supplies and a satellite phone for emergencies. Cell reception is non-existent here." The isolation might have frightened me once, but now it felt like a buffer between this new life and the judgments of the world I'd left behind. "Come," Rowan said. "There's someone else you should meet." He led me to the wolf enclosure, unlocking a heavy gate that opened into a small fenced transition area. "Wait here," he instructed. "Let them approach you." Rowan entered the main enclosure alone, and I watched in fascination as the wolves greeted him, not as pets would, but as equals. They circled, sniffed his hands and clothes, one even rising to place its paws briefly on his shoulders in what looked like an embrace. He spoke to them in low, rumbling tones, words I couldn't distinguish, but that seemed to calm and focus the pack. After several minutes, he beckoned me forward. My heart hammered as I stepped into the transition area, now separated from 5 full-grown wolves by only a single fence. They approached cautiously, noses working to capture my scent. "The black one with the white chest is Maya, the alpha female," Rowan explained quietly. "The large gray beside her is Sage, her mate. The others are Dakota, River, and Echo." Maya studied me with intelligent amber eyes, so similar to embers that I wondered if they might be related. She moved closer to the fence, her gaze never leaving mine. "Don't stare directly at her," Rowan advised. "It's a challenge. Look slightly away, then back." I followed his guidance, lowering my gaze and turning my head slightly. When I looked back, Maya had come right to the fence, her nose nearly touching the wire. She inhaled deeply, then made a soft sound in her throat. "She smells ember on you," Rowan said, surprise evident in his tone. "She's accepting you." The other wolves followed their alpha's lead, approaching to investigate me with varying degrees of curiosity. None showed aggression, though River, a reddish-brown wolf with a limp, kept his distance, watching warily from beneath a pine tree. "River was found caught in a trap, like that wolf from my childhood," Rowan explained, following my gaze. "Except I got to him in time. He'll never fully trust humans, but he tolerates me." "And the others? What are their stories?" I asked. Maya was raised illegally as an exotic pet, then abandoned when she grew too large to control. Sage was shot and left for dead by a farmer. Dakota and Echo were born in captivity to a fur farm. When they were rescued, they were too habituated to humans to be released. Each story twisted something in my chest. The cruelty inflicted by my own species, the resilience of these beautiful creatures who still found the capacity to trust. Rowan opened the inner gate. "Come in," slowly. I hesitated, instinctive fear warring with trust in his judgment. "Are you sure?" "Maya has decided. The others will follow her lead." His green eyes held mine. "Trust goes both ways, Eleanor." Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the enclosure. The wolves circled me cautiously, sniffing my clothes, my hands, my hair. I remained still, letting them investigate at their own pace. Maya came closest, her warm breath tickling my palm as she scented me thoroughly. "They can sense fear," Rowan said quietly, "but they also recognize compassion. What you did for Ember, risking everything to save him, that matters to them." As if understanding his words, Maya pressed her muzzle briefly against my hand, then turned and loped away toward the trees. The others followed, melting into the forest shadows until only Rowan and I remained in the clearing. "That went better than I expected," he admitted. "Maya doesn't usually accept strangers so quickly." Pride warmed my chest at earning the Alpha's approval. "They're incredible." "Yes." "And much misunderstood." He secured the gate behind us, like many things that people fear simply because they don't understand. Back in the main cabin, Ember had awakened and was whimpering softly for attention. I immediately went to him, checking his bandages and offering water. He licked my fingers weakly but seemed comfortable enough, the pain medication doing its job. "You have a natural way with him," Rowan observed, watching from the doorway. "Most people handle wolf pups too tentatively or too roughly. You find the middle ground." The compliment pleased me more than it should have. My grandmother always said I had a gift for soothing hurt creatures. I touched the wolf pendant beneath my shirt, a habit when thinking of her. "She'd have loved this place. You mentioned her before. She taught you about animals, among other things." I smiled at the memories. "She lived on the edge of town, kept to herself mostly. People called her eccentric, but to me she was just wise. She knew all the local plants, could predict weather changes before they happened, spoke about animals as if they were people with their own important lives. She sounds like someone who understood balance," Rowan said thoughtfully. "Humans have forgotten we're just one part of a larger whole." The conversation flowed easily as evening approached. Rowan prepared a simple meal of venison stew, and we ate at the worn kitchen table while discussing Ember's care schedule. Despite the circumstances and the short time I'd known him, I felt a strange comfort in Rowan's presence. His directness, his lack of pretense. As darkness fell, the wolves began to howl again, their voices rising and falling in complex harmony. Ember stirred at the sound, his tiny head lifting as if straining to understand the call of his kind. "They're saying goodnight," Rowan explained, a rare smile softening his features. "They do this at dusk and dawn." We listened together, the haunting melody filling the cabin. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt truly present, connected to something ancient and meaningful. "I should get back to my cabin," I said eventually, though reluctant to leave. "It's been a long day." Rowan nodded. I'll keep Ember here tonight where I can monitor him. Tomorrow we'll set up a proper rotation for his care. I gathered my few belongings, pausing at the door. Thank you, I said softly. For trusting me with all this. You earned that trust, he replied simply. Not many would have done what you did. In the guest cabin, I prepared for sleep in the unfamiliar surroundings, listening to the nighttime forest sounds through the partially open window. The enormity of the day's changes washed over me. My lost job, the wounded pup, this unexpected new path. By all logic, I should be terrified. Yet instead, I felt an odd serenity, as if I'd stumbled accidentally into exactly where I was meant to be. Sleep came easily, deep and dreamless until the pre-dawn hours when I woke to an unusual sound outside my window. Pulling on a sweater against the mountain chill, I peered out into the gray half-light. Maya stood in the clearing between the cabins, her black fur silvered by approaching dawn, amber eyes fixed on my window. When she saw me, she made that same soft sound I'd heard in the enclosure. Then she turned, looking pointedly toward Rowan's cabin before meeting my gaze again. Understanding bloomed instinctively. She was checking on Ember, using me as an intermediary. I nodded to her, whispering, "He's safe. I promise." As if satisfied, she melted back into the forest just as the first true light touched the eastern mountains. I dressed quickly and made my way to the main cabin, driven by both concern for Ember and a strange sense of responsibility to report to Maya. I found Rowan already awake, tending to Ember while coffee brewed on the ancient stove. The pup looked better this morning, alert, his eyes brighter as he eagerly accepted the formula I prepared. Maya came to my window before dawn, I told Rowan as we worked. It seemed like she was asking about Ember. He looked up sharply. At your window? Outside the enclosure? My hand stilled. Yes. Is that unusual? The enclosure is secure. She shouldn't have been able to get out. His brow furrowed as he checked Ember's bandages. I'll need to inspect the fencing. She wasn't aggressive, I assured him. Just concerned. Rowan's expression remained troubled. Wolves are incredible escape artists when motivated. If she's identified Ember as Pack, she might go to extraordinary lengths to reach him. After breakfast, Rowan left to check the enclosure while I stayed with Ember. The pup was growing stronger by the hour, his natural resilience asserting itself now that his injuries were properly treated. I found myself talking to him constantly, telling him stories about my grandmother, about the town I'd left, about the strange twists of fate that had brought us together. You've changed everything, little one, I murmured as he dozed against my chest. I don't even recognize my life anymore. The sound of the door opening interrupted my thoughts. Rowan stood there, his expression unreadable. Did you find where she got out? I asked. He shook his head slowly. The enclosure is completely secure. No breaks, no dig spots, nothing. But then how? I don't know. He ran a hand through his dark hair, leaving it charmingly disheveled. In 7 years, none of them has ever escaped. It's as if she simply... He trailed off, apparently unwilling to voice the impossible. A shiver ran through me. What aren't you telling me? Rowan's green eyes met mine directly. There are things about this place, about Maya, that I don't fully understand myself. He hesitated. The locals have stories, old legends about wolves that aren't entirely... wolf. His words hung in the air between us, laden with implications I wasn't certain I was ready to consider. Before I could press him for details, Ember whimpered in my arms, bringing me back to immediate concerns. Whatever Maya is or isn't, she seems to care about him, I said, focusing on the practical. And about us. Or she wouldn't have come to check. Rowan studied me for a moment, perhaps gauging whether I was dismissing his concerns or simply prioritizing. Yes, he finally agreed. Her behavior suggests protection, not threat. He moved to the window, gazing out at the enclosure visible in the distance. Still, I'd like you to tell me if you see her, or any of them, outside again. The days fell into a rhythm after that morning. Ember's care structured our hours, medications, bandage changes, feeding schedules. I slept in the guest cabin, but spent most daylight hours in the main house, where we had established a recovery area for the pup. Rowan continued his conservation work, sometimes disappearing into the forest for hours to check trail cameras or track wolf movements. but he always returned by dusk. I learned that Rowan's gruff exterior hid a deeply thoughtful nature. He spoke little of his past, but occasionally shared stories of the years he'd spent learning tracking from his Arapaho grandfather, or his formal education in wildlife biology. He read voraciously, his cabin filled with books on ecology, animal behavior, and native mythology. In the evenings, he often wrote detailed field notes while I tended to Ember, the comfortable silence between us broken only by the pup's contented sounds and the crackling fire. 2 weeks passed this way, each day strengthening not only Ember, but also the strange bond forming between Rowan and myself. We moved around each other with increasing familiarity, anticipating needs, sharing observations about Ember's progress without needing many words. The morning Ember first put weight on his injured leg, we celebrated like proud parents. The pup took 3 wobbly steps before tumbling sideways, looking so indignant at this betrayal by his own body that we both burst into laughter. "He has your determination," Rowan said, his green eyes crinkling at the corners. "And your stubbornness," I countered, enjoying the rare sound of his full laugh. Dr. Harlow visited twice more, pronouncing herself satisfied with Ember's healing. "You two make a good team," she observed during her final check, glancing between Rowan and me with knowing eyes that made heat rise to my cheeks. As Ember grew stronger, Rowan suggested we begin acquainting him with the adult wolves through the fence of the transition area. "He needs to learn wolf language," he explained. "Even if he can't live fully wild, he should know his own kind." I carried Ember to the enclosure, nervous despite Rowan's assurances. The adult wolves approached cautiously, Maya at the front as always. The alpha female pressed against the fence, nostrils flaring as she scented the pup. Ember squirmed in my arms, making high-pitched yips that caused Maya's ears to prick forward. To my astonishment, she answered with a soft, huffing sound. Ember responded immediately, his little tail wagging so hard his entire body wiggled. "They're communicating," Rowan said softly, wonder evident in his voice. "Maya recognizes him. How is that possible? They've never met." Rowan shook his head, as mystified as I was. "Wolves have recognition systems we don't fully understand. Scent markers, vocal patterns, or something else entirely." Each day after that, we brought Ember to the transition area for these strange interspecies conversations. All the adult wolves showed interest, but Maya's connection with the pup was unmistakable. She would lie for hours against the fence while Ember mirrored her position on our side, their bodies separated by wire, but somehow deeply attuned to each other. "I think she's teaching him," Rowan observed one afternoon as we watched Maya demonstrate what looked like a greeting ritual, which Ember promptly attempted to copy. Preparing him for pack life, the realization that Ember would eventually move from our care to the enclosure created an unexpected ache in my chest. I'd known from the beginning this wasn't a permanent arrangement, yet I'd grown attached to his warm weight against my heart at night, his excited greeting each morning. Rowan seemed to read my thoughts. "It won't be for several more weeks," he said gently. "And even then, you'll still see him every day." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. His hand found mine briefly, a warm pressure that conveyed understanding before withdrawing. That night, I dreamed of running through moonlit forests, wind in my hair, earth cool beneath my feet. Dream Maya ran beside me, guiding me deeper into ancient woods where shadows moved with purpose, and the boundaries between species seemed to blur. I woke with the sensation of pine needles against my skin and the lingering scent of wolf in my nostrils. The dream felt more like memory than fantasy, disorienting in its vividness. I rose and went to the window. Drawn by some instinct I couldn't name, the full moon illuminated the clearing between cabins with silver light, and there stood Maya, exactly as she had appeared in my dream. Our eyes met across the distance, and a strange understanding passed between us, an acknowledgement of shared secrets. This time, I wasn't surprised by her presence outside the enclosure. Somehow, I'd expected it. Without fear, I stepped onto the porch of the guest cabin. Maya watched me steadily, then turned her gaze toward the forest edge, looking back at me with clear invitation. Common sense told me to wake Rowan, to report this strange behavior. Instead, I found myself following the black wolf across the moonlit clearing toward the tree line. Maya moved unhurriedly, pausing occasionally to ensure I still followed. My rational mind screamed questions. How was she free? Where was she leading me? Why wasn't I afraid? But a deeper instinct kept me moving forward. We walked for perhaps 15 minutes, following what seemed to be a game trail winding through dense pines. The forest opened suddenly into a small meadow bathed in moonlight. At its center stood an ancient oak, its massive trunk speaking of centuries of growth. Maya led me directly to the tree, then sat beside what I now saw was a hollow space among its roots. She looked at me expectantly, intelligence burning in her amber eyes. I knelt beside the hollow, uncertain what I was meant to find. Reaching cautiously into the space, my fingers touched something cool and smooth, a stone, perfectly round and polished, about the size of my palm. When I withdrew it, the moonlight revealed its deep amber color, so similar to Maya's eyes, to Ember's eyes, to the eyes of the wolf pendant I wore. Maya made a soft sound of approval. Then, to my absolute shock, she spoke, not in words, but in a thought that formed fully in my mind, with unmistakable clarity. Guardian. I dropped the stone, scrambling backwards. This isn't possible, I whispered. Maya didn't move, her gaze steady on mine. Again, that voice that wasn't a voice filled my thoughts. You wear the mark. You saved the pup. You are chosen. My hand flew to my grandmother's pendant. I don't understand. Your blood remembers, even if you do not. Before I could question further, a distant call broke the silence. Rowan, shouting my name. The spell shattered, and Maya was simply a wolf again, slipping silently into the forest shadows as human footsteps crashed through the underbrush. Rowan burst into the clearing, flashlight beam dancing wildly until it found me. Eleanor! Relief and anger warred in his voice. What are you doing out here alone? I stood, the amber stone clutched tightly in my fist. Maya, I managed. She led me here. His expression shifted from anger to concern. Maya is in the enclosure. I checked before coming to look for you. That's not possible. She was just here. I pointed to where the wolf had sat moments before. Rowan's flashlight revealed nothing but undisturbed grass. He approached slowly, as if worried about my mental state. Eleanor, you were sleepwalking. It happens in these mountains sometimes, the altitude, the isolation. I wasn't sleepwalking, I insisted, opening my hand to show him the stone. She wanted me to find this. The amber caught the flashlight beam, glowing with internal fire. Rowan stared at it, then at me, his expression unreadable in the harsh light. Where did you get that? His voice had dropped to a whisper. In the tree hollow. Maya showed me. I gestured to the ancient oak. Rowan played his light over the tree, revealing the hollow among its roots. His hand trembled slightly as he turned back to me. We need to go back to the cabin, now. The urgency in his tone silenced my protests. We walked in tense silence, Rowan constantly scanning the forest around us. Only when we were safely inside the main cabin, Ember stirring sleepily at the disturbance, did he speak again. The stone you found is called Amber's Heart in local legends, he said, examining it in the lamplight. It's said to belong to the guardian of the boundary between human and wolf worlds. I sank into a chair, the events of the night catching up to me. I don't believe in fairy tales, Rowan. Neither did I, he said quietly, until I came to these mountains. He set the stone carefully on the table between us. The local tribes have stories about wolf walkers, humans who could take wolf form, who served as intermediaries between the two species. They were marked by amber eyes, regardless of which form they wore. Like Maya's eyes, I whispered. Like Ember's. Like your pendant, he added, gesturing to my grandmother's gift, which had slipped outside my nightshirt during our forest trek. My fingers closed around the silver wolf with its amber eyes. My grandmother said it was a family heirloom, that it would guide me when I needed direction. I looked up at Rowan. But that's just the kind of thing grandmothers say. Maybe. He sat across from me. Or maybe she knew more than she told you. The women in these stories were often the strongest wolf walkers, the guardians of old knowledge. I remembered my grandmother's affinity for animals, her uncanny weather predictions, her comfortable solitude at the forest's edge. Could there have been more to her wisdom than I'd understood as a child? Maya spoke to me, I admitted, the words sounding absurd even as I said them. Not aloud, but in my mind. She called me guardian, and said my blood remembers. Instead of the skepticism I expected, Rowan's expression showed only solemn acceptance. I've suspected something unusual about your connection with the wolves since that first day, when Maya accepted you immediately. He leaned forward. And there's something I haven't told you about Ember. What? My heart quickened with sudden apprehension. The poachers who killed his mother, they weren't just any hunters. They were specifically targeting that pack because of local rumors about wolves that weren't entirely wolf. He met my gaze directly. Ember's pack was Maya's original family. Her birth pack. But you said she was raised in captivity. That's what her rescue record showed, he confirmed. But I've always had questions. She appeared suddenly near town 7 years ago, injured but not feral like a truly wild wolf, too comfortable around humans to be wild, too skilled in wolf ways to be just a captive. The implications settled over me like a physical weight. You think she's... I think the legends have a basis in truth, he said carefully. And I think you and Maya share a connection that goes beyond ordinary human-animal bonds. Dawn found us still at the kitchen table, the amber stone between us, mugs of cold coffee forgotten as we pieced together possibilities neither of us had been prepared to consider. Ember slept peacefully nearby, oblivious to the revelations reshaping our understanding of his place in this strange story, and mine. My grandmother used to say that the world is full of old magic we've forgotten how to see, I said, watching early light play across the stone's surface. I always thought she was being poetic. The boundary between poetry and truth is thinner than we realize, Rowan replied. He reached across the table, hesitating before covering my hand with his. Are you afraid? The question made me pause. By all logic, I should be terrified. Of Maya's impossible freedom, of voices in my mind, of ancient legends suddenly intersecting with reality. Yet what I felt wasn't fear but recognition, as if pieces of myself long scattered were finally aligning. No, I answered truthfully. I'm curious, and maybe a little overwhelmed. Rowan's smile was gentle. That's a saner response than mine was when I first encountered things I couldn't explain. His thumb traced a small circle on my wrist, the casual intimacy making my pulse quicken. What will you do now? The question hung between us, weighted with unspoken implications. I had come here temporarily, to help with Ember's recovery. That task was nearly complete. Logic dictated I should return to town, find another job, resume my quiet existence. Yet the thought felt hollow, like contemplating a return to a half-life I'd outgrown. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm not ready to leave. I turned my hand beneath his, our fingers intertwining naturally. Not yet. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, perhaps, or hope. Before he could respond, a familiar howl rose from the direction of the enclosure, Maya calling the morning greeting, joined moments later by the other wolves. Ember stirred at the sound, raising his head and answering with his strongest howl yet. A tiny but determined voice joining the chorus of his kin. The sound struck a chord deep within me, resonating with something that felt like belonging. I need to understand what's happening, I said, gently disentangling my fingers from Rowan's to lift Ember for his morning feeding. If my grandmother was connected to these legends, if I am somehow part of them, I need to know. I've collected local stories for years, Rowan offered. Books, recorded oral histories from tribal elders. I never thought they might have practical application. He rose, stretching muscles stiff from our all-night conversation. We should sleep, then look through them together. We separated to our respective cabins, though sleep proved elusive despite my exhaustion. My mind circled endlessly around the impossible events of the night, around my grandmother's cryptic comments over the years, around the strange sense of rightness I felt in this remote place with Rowan, Ember, and the wolves. When I finally rose in the late afternoon, I found Rowan on the porch of the main cabin, surrounded by books and notebooks. Ember lay beside him in a patch of sunlight, his splinted leg extended as he dozed. I've been reviewing everything I have on wolf walkers, he said as I joined them, handing me a steaming mug of coffee. The stories vary, but certain elements remain consistent. I settled beside him, our shoulders touching lightly as he showed me his research. According to the legends, Wolf walkers were born, not made. The ability passed through bloodlines, often strongest in female descendants. They served as bridges between human and wolf societies, understanding both worlds and maintaining balance between them. The amber stone, Amber's heart, was said to amplify these innate abilities, allowing deeper communication and, in some versions of the legend, full transformation. The stories say the gift often skips generations, Rowan explained, pointing to his notes. A grandmother might show the signs, while her children live ordinary human lives. Then a grandchild is born with amber eyes or unusual affinity for wolves. I thought of my mother's pragmatic nature, how she'd always seemed embarrassed by my grandmother's superstitious nonsense, how she'd tried to raise me to be practical, sensible. Everything my grandmother was not. I've never shifted into a wolf, Rowan, I said, needing to ground this conversation in reality. I think I'd remember something like that. The legends suggest it's not always physical transformation, he replied. Sometimes it's a mental connection. The ability to understand wolves, to be understood by them, to dream their dreams. He studied my face, like you did last night. I couldn't deny the dream had felt different, more vivid, more real than ordinary dreams. And then there was Maya's voice in my mind, clear as speech. We should talk to Dr. Harlow, I suggested. She seems to know more about this place than she lets on. Rowan nodded. She comes from one of the oldest families in the region. If anyone would have insights beyond what I've collected, it would be her. Dr. Harlow arrived the following day, ostensibly to check Ember's progress. After examining the pup, she settled at the kitchen table where I'd placed the amber stone. She didn't seem surprised. I wondered if this would find its way back, she said, touching it lightly. It appears when needed, then disappears for generations. You know what it is? I asked. My great-grandmother was keeper of the stories. She looked up at me with keen eyes, including those about a woman with pale hair and a gift for healing who lived between worlds. They said when she wore the stone, wolves would speak to her, and the forest itself would guide her steps. My hand went instinctively to my grandmother's pendant. My grandmother left her hometown as a young woman. She never spoke of her family there. Many did, during those years. When the old ways were ridiculed, when connection to wolves meant persecution, Dr. Harlow's weathered hand covered mine briefly. But blood remembers, even when minds forget. The stone finding you is no accident, Eleanor. What am I supposed to do with it? I asked, the weight of inherited responsibility settling over me. That depends on what you want, she replied simply. The gift can be denied. Many have turned away from it, chosen ordinary lives. I thought of my job at the Wildlife Center. Safe, predictable, always feeling slightly apart from others. Had that separation been just my natural introversion, or something deeper? Had I always been meant for a different path? And if I don't turn away? I asked. Dr. Harlow smiled. Then you learn. You listen. You become the bridge your blood has prepared you to be. Her eyes moved between Rowan and me. With the right support, of course. After she left, Rowan and I took Ember for his now daily visit to the transition area. The pup had grown noticeably in the weeks since his rescue, his movements more coordinated, his personality emerging. Curious, determined, affectionate. He approached the fence eagerly, greeting Maya with familiar yips and body language they'd developed together. He'll be ready to join them soon, Rowan said, watching the interaction with obvious pride. Another few weeks to ensure the leg is fully healed. The thought no longer brought the same pang of loss. Ember would move from our direct care, but he wouldn't be leaving us. Not really. He would simply be expanding his family to include both the human and wolf worlds he bridged, much like I might be doing myself. I reached into my pocket, feeling the smooth contour of the amber stone. On impulse, I took it out, holding it in my palm as I watched Maya and Ember communicate through the fence. The change was subtle at first, a heightening of senses, smells becoming richer, sounds more distinct. Then Maya turned to look directly at me, and again I heard that voice-not-voice in my mind. Sister. This time I didn't pull away from the connection, but leaned into it, allowing my thoughts to form in response. I'm trying to understand. Understanding comes with time. Trust comes first. I felt Rowan tense beside me, watching the silent exchange he could see but not hear. I reached for his hand, anchoring myself to his solid presence as I navigated this new terrain. "Can you show me?" I asked Maya, not entirely sure what I was requesting. In response, a flood of images filled my mind, forests seen through different eyes, scents categorized in ways human language couldn't express, the complex social bonds of pack life rendered in emotional colors rather than words. The sheer alienness of it should have been terrifying, yet underlying the wolf perspective was a familiar essence. The same love of family, need for belonging, and joy in the natural world that form the core of human experience. When the connection faded, I found myself leaning heavily against Rowan, his arm around my waist supporting me. "Eleanor?" Concern edged his voice. "What happened?" "She showed me how she sees the world," I whispered, still processing the experience. "It was beautiful, different, but familiar." We walked back to the cabin in thoughtful silence, Ember trotting happily between us, his limp barely noticeable now. Inside, I placed the amber stone on the mantel, while Rowan built a fire against the evening chill. "What are you thinking?" he asked, settling beside me on the worn sofa. "That I've spent my life feeling like I didn't quite fit anywhere," I answered honestly. "Maybe this is why. Maybe I was meant to belong in both worlds, not just one." Rowan's hand found mine again, his calloused palm warm against my skin. "And where do you want to belong now?" The question contained another, unspoken one, that made my heart race. I turned to face him fully, taking in the strong lines of his face softened by firelight, the scar that spoke of his own connection to wolves, the green eyes that had watched me with increasing tenderness these past weeks. "Here," I said simply. "With the wolves. With Ember." I took a breath, gathering courage. "With you, if you want that too." His answer wasn't in words, but in the gentle press of his lips against mine. A kiss that felt like homecoming and new beginning woven together. When we parted, his forehead rested against mine, our breath mingling. "I've been alone a long time," he murmured, "caught between worlds myself, in a different way, never quite human enough for the town, never quite able to leave human concerns behind." His fingers traced my cheek. "Then you arrived, risking everything for a wolf pup, and suddenly the divide didn't seem so insurmountable. We make a good team." I echoed Dr. Harlow's words, smiling against his palm. "The wolf walker and the wolf protector." "Is that what you're choosing then?" he asked. "This life?" I thought of my grandmother's words. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet choice to be kind when the world expects you to turn away. I'd made that choice with Ember, not knowing it would lead me here, to this moment of decision that felt less like choosing a new path and more like recognizing the one I'd been walking all along. "Yes," I answered, though I think it might have chosen me first. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of the enlarged enclosure, watching Ember run with the pack. His injured leg had healed completely, leaving only the slightest hitch in his stride when he was tired. Maya had accepted him fully, as I'd known she would, teaching him wolf ways while allowing him to maintain his connection with Rowan and me. The conservation project had expanded under our joint leadership. My medical training complemented Rowan's tracking expertise, allowing us to monitor the local wild packs more effectively. Dr. Harlow had introduced us to sympathetic officials who valued our work, securing additional funding that let us hire 2 assistants for the busier seasons. In town, I was now known as the Wolf Woman, a title that might once have embarrassed me but which I wore with quiet pride. Children brought injured animals to our monthly clinic, listening wide-eyed as I explained the importance of predators in the ecosystem. Adults remained more skeptical, but even they had begun to acknowledge the benefits of our managed reintroduction program. The amber stone remained on our mantle, used only occasionally when deeper communication was needed. My abilities had strengthened with practice, needing less external focus now. I couldn't transform physically, as some legends suggested, but the mental connection with the wolves had deepened, allowing me to serve as interpreter between species in ways I was still discovering. As twilight gathered, Rowan joined me at the fence, his arm slipping naturally around my waist. Together we watched as Ember initiated the evening howl, his voice now strong and clear as it rose to join Maya's deeper tone. One by one, the other wolves added their voices to the chorus. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash through me. Without the stone, I couldn't hear Maya's thoughts directly, but I felt her contentment, her approval of what we'd built together, a place where wolf and human needs were balanced, where ancient connections were honored alongside modern conservation science. Happy? Rowan asked, pressing a kiss to my temple. I leaned into him, watching Ember prance proudly among his adoptive family, remembering the desperate choice I'd made to save him that rainy evening that now seemed a lifetime ago. That single act of compassion had cost me a job, but given me a calling, had separated me from a world where I'd never truly belonged and led me to one where I was essential. Yes, I answered, turning to meet Rowan's kiss more fully, the wolves' song surrounding us like a blessing. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be,